see if this works. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the POWLAX podcast. It is July 2nd of 2020. Definitely a crazy summer going on, and so I'm happy to say that we're back and playing. It has been a crazy month of June. We moved. It's been there's been a lot going on, and so in the podcast today, I'm not really sure of exactly where we'll take this and where exactly what we'll end up talking about. We are going to be doing a coaches only Q&A after this at 10:30, so I'll be saving some of the lacrosse oriented questions and things like that, practice planning things for that. But so I hope all of you guys have been having a great week. So to start off today, I wanted to first acknowledge everyone who has continued to support on Patreon. I definitely appreciate it. Sorry things have not been kind of going up recently. We've been very busy. It's definitely a tough thing moving with a toddler and a pregnant wife. That's definitely, everything basically falls in on me to make sure certain things get done because it's just what life really is. But so I'm happy to say that we got the office all set up right. That's why we actually didn't do the podcast yesterday, because it wasn't going to work. 'Cause Turner didn't have daycare yesterday, and so he was around. And then when it actually finally came time to do anything, it just didn't really work out. But so either way, I'm excited to be back. Hopefully, I will not bore everyone too badly. I don't really have too much planned. But so the first thing I wanted to talk about is being kind of things that I've said in the past that were kind of dumb. And so that's the first thing we're going to go. What's going on, Mike? Thank you. Happy belated birthday. I know I hit you up on Facebook, but so it's good to see you too. It's good to be back and actually, doing things. I'm excited to get to work on stuff now that everything's kind of settled down a little bit more. I'm actually going to be changing up the first video that will be coming out soon based on references to the collegiate lacrosse statistics. So rather than do either the Duke, 5-man rotation into a zone man-down defense, we'll probably be doing the Richmond man-down defense, which I'm very excited to do. They were third, and they were third in man-down defense percentage, and they were the one team. I didn't have any film of the second or first team, so I'm deciding to do the Richmond one. But so, first thing I want to talk about is something that I said when I took over Grandview at the parents' meeting. And so this is something that I definitely didn't quite understand before. But so, before you have kids, you have this idea of kind of what it's like for parents. So there's this big, huge discussion, not really a discussion, it's just that parents suck. You know what I mean? Like, parents who overly dictate to a coach and who yell from the sidelines and are just absolutely ridiculous. They're just not fun to be around. And there's I just remember at Grandview in my first, second, third year there during the meetings, I'm like, I know that these are your kids. I understand how you feel towards them. I understand that you want the best for them. But at this level, you really got to you kind of just got to let your kids be your kids. And you have to let them go through kind of what is happening. And the thing that I find now, as I say it, I'm like, I kind of understand what it's like. And I just think that is such BS now. Because before having Turner, and before understanding, and so I bet it's different as kids get older, but at this point, it is, having a toddler around is a ridiculous responsibility, and you just have to track them everywhere they go because they want to put everything in their mouth. Like, the Tide Pod Challenge was probably started by a toddler for sure. And I just think that there's a level of responsibility and ownership of your life that you don't have if you don't have a kid. And so it's just funny kind of looking back on those conversations as I'm thinking about Turner and how I would interpret, coaching and it basically was just a realization that I had no idea what I was in for as far as being a parent. Like I kind of did, but in the same sense, the day-to-day monotony of doing the same things over and over, and wiping butts and cleaning up after them, and trying to make sure that every little thing around the house gets done. It's not something that just happens. You know what I mean? Like it is a full-time investment. It's a full-time job, and I was having a conversation with a parent yesterday at the Scorpions practice, and he just came up and kind of was like, "Hey, man, how's life? How's the kid? How's everything going? Like, how's your wife? She's pregnant." My immediate response is it's great. Like, I definitely think being a father is the best title I've ever had. Like I just love interacting with Turner. I love being a father. I had a vision not yesterday, but a couple days ago of taking Hadley to her prom, not like taking her to her prom, but like, taking pictures before her prom. And I was super excited about it. Hadley's not even here yet. And so I just thought it was a very cool thing to be a dad. But so as this other father kind of asked me like how I was, it was just such a cool thing to have like a direct reference, not a reference, but it's cool to connect over family because family's always been like so important to me. And I feel that there's a commitment and a connection. And you really can't understand. I think Jordan Peterson says it best. He says, you don't truly become an adult until you are not basically until you have kids, until you have someone who is in direct, is directly impacted by whatever your actions are and kind of what is happening. But so you look at this whole crazy situation we're in, and many people are in situations where their ability to put food on the table, to pay for their mortgage, to do all of these things has been impacted. And, I think to what I kind of thought being a parent was going to be back then. And now I see it. And I think I just feel like it's such a much more immersive situation. Obviously you can't know something till you live it, but so I just thought that was kind of a crazy situation. In other news, kind of a cool thing. So as I have gone through my coaching journey and I've, tried to share everything I kind of know and understand with as many people as possible. And that's why all of the stuff that I create, is free on YouTube, and why, and it's very cool to hear about people from other countries and other places around the world who are using it because, and it's really just me passing on information that I've learned from others. Like I don't own any of the ideas, but it's a very fun thing to kind of impact and to kind of just to see and look back on my growth through time as a coach. But so, a very cool thing that's happening right now is this 7v7 league that our POWLAX team is playing in on Saturdays. And so we're actually getting back in and playing. And so I'll do kind of a brief overview of kind of what we're getting started with now. But I had a cool conversation with a guy who was there who I know from, actually, I think he's my exact same age. But when I was growing up, I was kind of playing in my backyard, and he was playing with the Grayland team. So basically there's a school in Denver called the Grayland School. And when I was growing up, they were the ones they had the lacrosse coaching, and that was basically it. They had a team called Red Hawks, and they were the best players because they picked it up when they were young. They were, coached all the way through. And this player ended up going to Boys Latin and Cornell. He was actually a midfielder in that epic 2009 national championship game against Syracuse. And as we were talking, it was cool to kind of hear his perspective on what he's been doing because he's very into the, obviously into the lacrosse community, but also, he works with Jamie, and he does a lot of the video production for players and kind of shows them exactly what it is. And it was very cool to kind of hear him talk about his perspective on the 3D methodology and how 3D is a very good methodology in order to get players reps doing brand new things. But at the end of the day, when you're a coach and the objective is to win the game, you have to do a lot more 6-on-6. You have to do a lot more actual planning with your team, more so than you may have to, just get players reps. And so as we move in and we all start playing again, I think that there are a couple things that we have to make sure that we focus on first before other things, right? So the first I would say is activating young players' bodies. If they haven't been moving and if they've basically been inactive, you can't just throw them into 6-on-6 and think that they're not going to, I don't know how elastic young players are, but they're not as elastic as I'd say I think that they would be, and they think they are. But so definitely to make sure when you get warm-ups, you actually get good warm-ups and that the players are not just going through the motions and that you're getting them warmed up, activating their glutes, their hamstrings, and their quads, make sure their legs are all warmed up, make sure that they're, actively getting engaged in moving their bodies before they get into the actual game so you can prevent a bunch of injuries. The other thing is focusing on some sort of leg strength thing. So this is a part of the warm-up, but doing things like high skips, far skips, bounds. I think we called ours Spider-Mans, where you just do basically a long 45-degree lunge. But so that aspect of reintegrating players into the athletic, basically reintegrating them into athletics is so important because so many of them have just been playing video games for this whole time. The next thing I would say that is unbelievably important when you're starting after stopping is playing the game. Like, there's no substitute for actively playing and being in situations that impact your mind. And so when you're going in through, what would you call it? So when you're thinking about players who haven't played a while, a lot of coaches immediately think to stick skills and wall ball. They immediately go to that. And it's like, yes, definitely, that's actually something that they should have been able to do while they were doing it, while we were kind of under this lockdown or whatever. But when you look at the game and how you have to be able to play the game, you have to have that fluency. And I think that aspect is very important. So Coach Mike just said, U.S. Lacrosse suggests 2 weeks of return to play workouts prior to getting into competition. I think that's that's definitely a valid point. I'm not taking 2 weeks off of competition to get them into their workouts. I'm just going to have them play after they get a good warm-up in, and so that they activate their bodies. Now, they're definitely going to notice if they haven't been lifting, haven't been doing other things, that they're not going to be able to make the moves that they could when they were doing it. And I think that goes back to the idea of, I remember talking when I was lifting in college. So I hated lifting in high school. When I got to college, it finally was something where I could actually lift and really enjoy it, because I got to a point where I could see the strength benefit of it. But so once these kids come back, they're not able to probably make the moves that they were able to make as we were building up for the season, right? Like, everyone had, months of time to train and all this preseason stuff that we're beginning with the season. And when it finally came time to get going, right, everything stopped. And that definitely wasn't anyone's fault. But at the end of the day, now we have to make sure that, basically, the players just need to understand that they're not going to be able to go 100%, and 100% to the ideal that they had when they stopped playing in March, right? That's kind of the whole idea. I think that one of the things that helps us as we get kind of back into playing is, you're going to do your stick skills, but it's going to be, light. And I think it really kind of depends on your individual situation. So within these all the time usually, knowing who you're going to have on a given day dictates what you're able to do, right? If you have 12 players, it doesn't make much sense, or say 13 players, including a goalie. It doesn't make sense to do sixes for a long time because, players need to rest between. Like, if you really want to talk through everything, you might have them run sixes and then pause and then run it again. But the ability to have subs within all of your drills and kind of keep things running is very important to how you're going to dictate. So if you have 22 players versus 12, it's a very different scenario. You're going to be able to do a lot more things. And right, so a couple of the drills we've been doing quite a bit often is basically just spreading the field into offensive and defensive lines and playing in transition stuff so that they're getting used to the idea of stopping ball on defense, drawing on offense, dumping the ball on offense, making sure that they are not allowing one player to play two on offense, defensively communicating rotations, all of these things that just allow them to see and understand the necessities that they're going to have to do. And so to start off with something that requires all of those things is very important. And the goal of the whole thing is to make sure that when your players are playing, they have a direct understanding of exactly what and why things are either going well or things are not going well, right? Like you don't want to put them into individualistic drills for the majority of the practice, which are working on dodges and things of that nature, when they need to get up to speed mentally on all of the mechanics of the game. Like anytime, so the part hold method is nice, right? Everyone seems to use it. It's the one that makes sense. You want to take the game at its 3,000 foot view or 30,000 foot view, and then you want to segment out specific aspects of that game and focus on those specific aspects. But every time you pull from one level, your 30,000 foot view, to the next level and then back again, and then more and more, and you get more finessed and more into it, you're pulling the techniques and the items out of the actual gameplay, which is going to basically make it not like the actual game. Now, that's not to say that repetition and dodging drills and shooting drills aren't going to allow players to improve, but their ability to integrate those skills into the game without a lot of actual play just doesn't seem to happen with at least with the players that I'm around, because it's something where it's basically like being a practice player. Like they can execute the best type of, split roll or step down shot off of a feed, but then understanding where that step down shot's going to be within the concepts of our offense, which allows them to just play through and read and react to each other, that's a lot more tough. But so that's why I'm a huge, I don't even do much dodging anymore 1v1. We did yesterday because we did a whole footwork series where we're learning how to start and stop, but for the most part, 1v1s are an aspect of a two-man game. That's the way I've began to think about it now, because if you think about the fact that there's one ball and at least 5 players off ball in a settled offensive set, you basically have 5 two-man games going on with the ball carrier. And so your ability to recognize your defenseman and be able to allow the ball carrier to do what they need to do while occupying your man and being in a position where if your man slides, you are immediately able to make them kind of pay for any mistakes that they make, I think is the kind of important part. But so that was way further into the, coaching side of getting back at it than I thought that I would go. But so, let's see. What else is kind of going on? My brain's definitely a bit spacey. It's been, getting home late, getting up early. Like, if you don't get up at 6 a.m., I don't know what you're doing with your life, because there's just so much that gets done in those first couple hours of the day that whenever I don't wake up early, I always feel like I'm just kind of wasting away the day. But so I was going to read a portion of the book, but it's upstairs and I don't know that I'll go get it. But I think I could probably look it up, actually. July 2nd. Oh, and we're into a new month. Let's see. Okay, let's see if this is actually it. It doesn't matter if it is or isn't, but it looks like something. So I'm just pulling up a, I guess it's Micropreneur is the website. But so the daily Stoic for today is: never shrink the proper dispatch of your duty. No matter if you are freezing or hot, groggy or well rested, vilified or praised, not even if dying or pressed by the other demands. Even dying is one of the important assignments of life, and in this, as in all else, make the most of your resources to do well the duty at hand. Marcus Aurelius, Meditations 6.2. So then what they say in the book is: oversimplification can be one of the best allies of a philosophy or one of its best enemies in my mind. When I talk about oversimplification here, I mean reducing moral questions, decisions, and situations to a black or white choice scenario. This is one of the cases when it does not work for me. Let me explain. Okay, so never shrink the proper dispatch of your duty, no matter if you are freezing or hot, groggy or well rested, vilified or praised, not even if dying or pressed by other demands. So what I think that's saying, and I could be totally wrong, what I think that's saying is basically that whatever you have to do, don't make it seem less than it actually is, and don't take it less serious than it should be taken. So yesterday I was going to do the podcast at 2 p.m, but I was spent. There was nothing I could even think of or even do. But so I knew that I wanted to do it, and that's why I kind of moved it to today. And even though I'm still a little bit tired and not able to do it, I wanted to make sure that I've got to get back into the swing of actually doing this every week and making sure that I have certain things on my mind that I want to actually get out there, because I think that, from this podcast at the beginning, it's all about myself trying to figure out and get my ideas in. And the toughest part for me now is actually making sure that I'm talking lacrosse more so than kind of what's happening in the world. I'm definitely a big news advocate. I like to watch the news. I like to know what's kind of going on. And then when you get into the polarization of all of that, it can kind of take your mind away from the focus on lacrosse. And I feel that because of lacrosse being such a big part of my life, that sometimes I just need to make sure that I have the focus that I need to. But so shrink the proper dispatch of your duty. Never shrink the proper dispatch of your duty. I'm wondering what he means by dispatch, because that's the word that's cutting my mind right now, because you would never want to shrink. So the proper, I don't know if it's the effect. Let's look up dispatch. Dispatch is basically to send or to do, right? Dispatch, send off to a destination or for a purpose. Okay, so never shrink the purpose of your duty. So here's one thing that I struggle with coaching on a daily basis. There's a level of lacrosse where you want, and in any sport, anything really, there's a pride and a purpose to mastery of anything, right? So, let's take this. Recently, during our move, so let's go back a bit. So this is just going to be a nice little story, and I'll kind of explain, hopefully, how my duty as my duty as the man of the house is to make sure that certain things don't fall apart, right? I'll get to that in kind of a backwards way. So I love riding my bike with Turner. And so I have this little pull cart that my brother gave me where I kind of pull him behind myself, right? And so Cherry Creek Path is right by us. And so literally I could go out my door 200 yards. I'd be on Cherry Creek Path, and I can go all the way up to Denver through Cherry Creek Path. It's an amazing path. It's way cool. You go under all these bridges, through all these trees. And actually where we are now, it's there's tons of woods around, and I'm super excited to actually get going. But so recently I bought a thing that allows me to carry Turner on the frame of the bike instead of pulling him behind me. And so instead of having him be behind me in his little cart, he is directly in front of me, and he can look around, and we're riding together. He can point out birds, he can point out squirrels. It's amazing the difference and the connection that you get instead of pulling him behind me. Eventually that will become Hadley in the front and Turner will have his place in the back. But this new way of doing things is just, it's much better in terms of, what's the word? It's just, it's a more immersive experience of riding a bike with my son is what it is, right? But so when I got my mountain bike in college, another stupid decision that I made, I bought it off of Craigslist for $800. I'd say that it probably retailed. So, and this is 12 years ago, right? I bought it for like, I think $800. It retailed probably 6 years before I bought it for $2,400. And when I got it home, it actually had this nice like dent in the back. And so my friend Nick Horan and I, he was a big mountain biker. He's one of the reasons I got it, because I took his bike out a couple times, really liked the kind of single track riding. And we fixed up my bike. We put a new set of handlebars on it, handlebars that were flat, that didn't kind of have the curve. And it was just for more control, or so he said. And then we put a new, I don't even know what you'd call it. It's where the fork of the front wheel connects to the handlebars. Don't know what it's called. But so this kind of put it out in front of me a little further, and for whatever it was, it allowed me to go to drive better. But so now, with Turner's thing on the bike frame, I was leaning over too far, so Turner couldn't actually sit up. And so basically what ended up happening is whenever I would ride, my chest, and I'm a very barrel-chested person, my chest would hit his head with his helmet on, and so he'd kind of like be down like this, and I didn't like him to kind of have to crouch like that. But so there's a weird thing that always, I mean, I don't know if it's just the fact that I have positive intention about my life, or I just get lucky, or what it is, but I think that my attitude and kind of like keeping certain things in focus allows me to find the things I need when I need them. So my aim, I think, is pretty good. And so I'm thinking I need new handlebars, and 2 days later, a cruiser bike was put in the trash at our old condo. And so it's just by the trash can, and I'm like, well, I need new handlebars. So I took the bike out of the trash. I took the handlebars from it that have the nice kind of like curve up back towards you. And so instead of being way over Turner, I was now back and tall enough where he could, enjoy his ride. Now, as I changed that, it screwed up all of the dimensions of it screwed up the tension of the cables of the brakes and the shifters. And so as that happened with the shifters and the brakes, once I got the bike here, I'd ridden it a few times with Turner, but once I got it to the new house, I noticed that the brake cables and it was mainly the brake cable was fraying and breaking. And so at this point, had that cable broken while I was like going full speed, now I'm relying on one set of brakes, which may have helped, may have worked, and that may have, I like the idea that you have two. You definitely don't want to slam on that front brake, but I mean, you can definitely stop with your front brake. But so basically I had to redo all of the cables on my bike. And in order to do this, I was going to buy a stand, right? So if you're working on a bike, you want to make sure that you have a stand, because as you are messing with the mechanics of the brakes and the mechanics of the shifters, you want to make sure that the bike is off the ground, so that if you ever need to kind of pedal to make sure that the shifting lines are working correctly, you don't have to lift the bike up, pull the pedals, and then basically it's way easier to make that happen. Like, you can actually track your progress as you're not tracking your progress. It's very annoying to try to fix a bike on the ground. So having a rack helps you to, lift the bike off the ground. But so I've got two parts of expertise that I'm trying to get to the point of why it's so important that you kind of make sure you know what you're doing. So the first is the fact that I've got to make sure as I'm putting the shifters on this bike and the brake lines on this bike that I'm not screwing it up so that then when I'm out they break or they don't go on, right? So I researched it all. I made sure that I did this all right. And then I have this thing of I needed this rack, but so what I ended up buying is these awesome racks that are actually that you hang from the ceiling in your garage, and you can just kind of like pulley the bikes up to the ceiling. And so our ceiling in our garage is probably like 11 feet high, I'd say. And now instead of having the bikes in the way of all of our cars and having a bunch of other, crap on the ground, now we pull them up and they're literally hanging in the rafters of our garage. And you can get them down really easily. It's like a really cool thing. But so the trouble is, if you're going to be hanging a rack with a bike on it in the garage, you need to make sure that that shit's not going to fall down onto you or the cars or, your kid, right? But so I've never been very much of a, I've never been a construction style person. I remember working for my brother's stepdad one day. He asked me to take a door down, and I was like, what? Like, I don't know how to take a door down. And so then as I'm trying to like figure it all out and like to do all of the things, either way, this was just a day back in the day. It was like, I just had no idea how it all worked. And so without that knowledge, I had no idea what to do. And so I tried all these really stupid things. And then I learned how a door worked, and like actively doing it is the best thing. Right. But so as I'm going to put this bike rack up, I had to get basically a 10-foot 2x6 that I could install the rack to the 2x6s. And I cut that 2x6 by 10 feet in half. So I had two 5-foot segments. I staggered them so I could put the bikes closer together so that the handlebars weren't, in there. But so I had to, measure again. And then I'm by myself holding up these, I'd say, 15, 20 pound 2x6s as I'm measuring and finding the studs in the ceiling, and then, putting lag bolts in it, which lag bolts are awesome. Those are just, that's, I guess, yeah, it's how my TVs are hung and now how I see that these racks are hung. But you could tell me how to do that 1,000 times, and until I'm actually doing it, there's no way I'm actually going to be able to do it at a level where I feel like it's actually going to be safe. But so in going and in actively learning and doing all of these things, you find the mastery at a level that will allow you to competently get that thing done. And so there's a level of lacrosse that is like that too, right? So I had to study for, a couple of hours to make sure that I put the bike together in the way that made sense. And as I, started to do it, I would screw up, then I'd go back and I would do it again. And so the thing that I struggle with, which was the whole point of telling you about the fact that I had to fix my bike and the fact that I had to hang up this rack, is that there's a level of pride in getting something done right? And there's a level of pride in being good at what you do. And the thing that I struggle with quite a bit is mediating the difference between enjoying what you do and making sure that you are doing it at a level that is, the best that you could possibly be, right? So take Colorado Springs. The Olympic training facility for the U.S., Olympic team is in Colorado Springs because the elevation helps them, gain more hemoglobin molecules on their blood or whatever you want to call it, whatever. The elevation helps them. It's like being in hyperbaric chamber. But so those people are studying the way to be the best all the time, right? But everyone doesn't want to be the best. Everyone doesn't care about being the best lacrosse player. A lot of kids just want to play. But you're doing kids a disservice if you're not helping them improve at what they're doing, because in order to enjoy the game, you want to be successful at the game. It's the same pride of being able to hang a bike rack in your garage. You either have the ability to do it and be competent at it, or you don't. And so, my ability to actually go put that up, I take pride in now because, I had to go and I had to go learn it and I had to actively do it. But so there's, I guess I'm trying to think of the exact dichotomy I'm talking about, but for me, sport has always been an activity that I enjoyed doing because I was able to be around my family, Like, I was able to be and interact with my brothers. I was able to hang out with my friends. I was able, and I got good at it because I did it all the time, right? That was probably the most important part. And the part that I never really got into was the, like I mentioned earlier, was like the lifting, make sure I was the biggest, the fastest, the strongest. And as you're thinking about coaching, especially in high school so like if you're coaching in college, every single person that, well, let's go D1, D2, D3 college, right? Even at the low end Division III colleges, those players are some of the best players in the country at the high school level, right? So I think they say 15% of high school lacrosse players go on to play in college. And so you're taking the top 15% of players, and that includes MCLA, JUCO, and all of the others. So if we're just taking NCAA D3, you're taking the top 10% of players. And so once you get to that collegiate level, it's all about being the best and making sure your team is at the absolute best they can possibly be. But now, if I'm going to be in a headspace that makes me a great coach at Ridgeview Academy, where the kids have never actually played, many are just in trouble with the law and will never play again, if I make that about they have to be the best players, I'm going to drive my brain into the ground, because being the best lacrosse player has no place in that environment, right? The whole thing is about allowing the players to see a new game and to experience a new game and to have fun while they do it. And so I think that that's such a big point of the way that I like to coach now is you'll find specific instances where you can really dial in something. Like yesterday, like I mentioned earlier, we did a lot of start and stopping, right? And so this is a drill that I did when I was at CU with, I think it was BP. He's a, I don't know, physiologist, something like that. But he trained us how to start and stop. And this was at a point where I was already in college. And so I'm like thinking to myself, why didn't I learn this earlier? But one of the reasons you don't learn that earlier is because the need to focus on the subtle mechanics must happen after a player has chosen to be the best, to be as good as they can. Now, when you look at certain schools, they have that culture, like Kent Denver, Valor, Creek. Valor goes out and Valor and Regis actually go out and recruit the players that can be that. And so it's a little different for them. But when you look at a place like Creek, many of the players, and because of the size and the community surrounding lacrosse, you have a couple things that really help them. The first is their players understand the difference between being a player at Creek and, well, so how do I explain this? First off, there are enough players that want to be the best that they end up being one of the best teams consistently. So those players, their top 15 players, put in a ton of work year round. And if you're going to be a state contending team, you have to have players that will do that. They also have the culture built through time, through freaking amazing coaches. Like, they have coaches at every level who would do great as head coaches at a lot of places, and coaches are in low supply, as everybody basically knows. But more than that, the players understand that they are always vying for a state championship, whereas at other schools, there's kind of an acknowledgement that the ability to put in, like, you see the Mighty Ducks story, right? You got all these kids who have never played before, and then they end up beating the team that trains all the time. It's complete BS is what it is, because when you look at the breadth of work, like on any given day, there are miracles that can happen, and that can be a part of it. But if you take each individual that will step on the field for any amount of time, right? So you've got 60 minutes in a game, and you've got 10 players, you've got 600 minutes. Within those 600 minutes, if you take all of the work and the minutes put in by each player and you magnify them by each other, the players who are at the best schools and who are the collegiate players who play at Duke and, you know, all of these places, they have put in thousands upon thousands of hours honing their craft, honing their athleticism, or maybe it's God-given athleticism, you know, like Paul Rabel started playing as a sophomore or something, but Paul Rabel is not your average human, right? He's huge. He's big. He's athletic. Like Miles Jones is not your average human. And so their ability to be athletic is something that gives them that extra like thing. But it doesn't make sense to... So, okay. I'm getting into another thought now, which is coaching to the average, which you never want to coach to the average. You want to coach to the best of your ability, but you also don't want to take away the joy by making it a job for players who don't want it to be a job. That's basically the ultimate ending of kind of this thing that I kind of struggle with is I want to be meticulous in my coaching so that the players who would like to shave that 1/10 of a second off their roll to a shot can do it, but I don't want it to be so monotonous that the players who really just want to enjoy the time with their friends can like enjoy the time with their friends, you know, because if you take the time and you focus completely in on the individual mechanics of a specific skill, it gets boring. And if you go out and you actively play, that's more fun. But you also, and that's the thing where now as you look into first class lacrosse, what is it? Shake School, all of the, you know, Rob Pennell and Tom Schreiber have their Players Academy things up. As you look into the ability to get great coaching at home through specific, you know, through your computer, players can do that for cheap now. You know, I think Shake School is $24 a month. Players Academy is like $30. I want to say First Class Lacrosse is like $25 a month. And if players want to get better, they have the access to the information that will allow them to do what they need to do. Now, that's not what it's like to have an actual skills coach. Then you look at the players who are playing with Brian Langtry now, and they improve super quick. So here's a cool story. So there's a player playing for POWLAX now who played for Brian at 6 Star, I want to say a couple years ago. And it's so fun to watch him in practice because the way Brian coaches is so methodical, Long Island, that the mechanics that this player has brought to what he does in our practices is awesome. Now, in the confines of a new experience, this player struggles to adapt to specific situations. But in the minutia of the game, when he can get a scenario he knows from Brian's coaching, he crushes it. And I remember this last weekend, actually, we were playing our first game that I was actually able to coach, and he caught a ball up top and sniped top corner from like 17 yards. It was unbelievable. And that's all because he took the time to do the mechanics. And it's so funny because everyone's just like hooting and hollering, cheering. Like it was unreal. It was so cool to watch our new group of players like really bond over watching him do this. And it's just an interesting dynamic because you get these players who have focused so much on their individual skills and can struggle in the live play scenarios to read and react in the way that they should. But when you put them in that position where they know exactly what to do, like he crushed it. It was so cool to watch. And so it's funny because there is that, you have both sides, you know. If you don't understand how the game works and how to get into your position, you're never going to get into the spot where you've trained. And if you don't train the individual mechanic enough to execute it when you're actually in that position, you also don't have it. But so there's this, there's this dilemma of how much do you want to focus on playing versus not playing. And my answer to that is, if players, you have to have a baseline of skills in order to play the game, and you also have to be able to play the game to insert the skills. So it's definitely a chicken or the egg problem, but I think in the grand scheme of things, it kind of has to be both. And so I guess when it comes time to coach, you do have to have little inklings of both. Here's the other thing I noticed too, and this is something I learned at Grandview in the I want to say my second year at Grandview. So in the second year at Grandview, we did really well, and we made the quarterfinals. We beat Columbine. We were the 12 seed. They were the 5 seed. We beat Columbine in the first round. And one of the things we did when we got to the end of the season was, after the players kind of knew our systems and understood what to do, teaching them the new techniques really helped them to, it just brought on a new element of motivation for how they could dictate matchups and be the best that they could, right? But so if they hadn't had the understanding of how this specific thing got put into, so what I taught them was the hitch, right? But not a hitch in terms of like a wind up hitch and go forward, more so a rocker. But it's essentially just kind of a skip turn where you bounce off of one of your feet, you turn your hips and shoulders, and then you explode off the same foot. And once we did that, the players completely just it brought a new level to the way that they played and the motivation, because they were doing new things. But so it's definitely an interesting kind of dilemma on exactly what you want to do. And to wrap it up, I'll say, because we kind of started with the announcement that I'm going to be doing a video on Richmond's man down defense instead of we'll do Duke's and we'll do Virginia's and we'll do Richmond's, but Richmond's was the best in terms of their percentage of not allowing shots. So I want to do that one first. All of them will eventually get videos. Whether or not they'll all be this year will be, that'll be the question, because you definitely want to put in enough time to each one. But to end on Richmond, as we began on Richmond, hold on. When I don't know why I'm blanking on his name. When I asked Coach Chamati what he thought about the idea of mechanics versus playing, his answer was very clear. Teach the mechanics, right? There's no reason for players to step back and have to relearn all of the mechanics a lot later. But then you look at these players like the Thompsons, who have mechanics that other players can't even imagine having, because they just play and they've just done it so many times and they're so good at it. And so it's definitely it's still a chicken or the egg problem for me, but for him, for Chamati, and for Langtree, and for a lot of these players out east and these coaches out east, they're like, no, it's got to be fundamentals. And the selling point for them is, if they know the fundamentals in the game, they're going to have a better time because they're going to be more successful during that game. But so I thought that was, it's a kind of cool dilemma, cool dichotomy. But so that also goes back to today's daily Stoic, where you're like, don't shrink your duty as being a coach that can not only spread the game, but can also help your players become the best players that they could possibly be. But so I think that's going to wrap us up for this week. If you want to buy Pearl lacrosse balls, make sure to use code POWLAX when you buy them. You'll get 10% off, and it'll kick back a percentage to the channel. I actually need to get some more balls here shortly, because they get lost, but at least I never have to worry about someone yelling out greaser, which I've actually had to deal with a lot recently, because I haven't been using the Pearl balls. I had to buy a other set on an emergency recently, and so I've had some greasers in the bag, which I just can't stand doing. But so Also, if you're looking for a way, here's another cool announcement, and I'm really shocked I didn't actually lead with this. But so Dick's had a sale yesterday, and I bought 3 4x4 pop-up goals from their primed company, which is they're basically 4x4. What do you call them? They're 4x4, not flip. What are they called? What are the goals that pop up, but they're not bownettes? That's it. They're bownet goals, right? So Jamie has been talking about how using 4x4 goals has helped with their 3x and 4x sessions and things that they like to go play, because just the 3x goal is so small that it kind of makes players hesitate where they wouldn't usually. But so the 4x4 goal really allows them to shoot. But so I got 3 4x4 goals yesterday for $180. So $60 per goal. And these are strung goals that can pop up wherever you need them. And so the reason I bought them was because I want to use the 4x4 goals, and I want to bring the 3x3s back into my basement. And they fold up kind of nicely, because the big 6v6 goal doesn't work very well in my cart, which I also graduated to a cart, which is nice too. So next announcement is I really advocate for the flip goalie trainer. If you don't have a goalie at your practice, make sure you allow your players to shoot as if there was a goalie in net. Yeah. And also thank you again for all the people who support the POWLAX Patreon. I definitely couldn't do any of this stuff without all of you guys. We'll have some new stuff coming out soon. And I hope you guys have a good week. If you have any questions or anything, let me know. We'll be doing a coach's Q&A here shortly, where we're going to go over some practice planning, kind of what we've been doing recently, and kind of how to get a little bit more in depth on what exactly we've been doing as we've gotten back to running. So thanks, guys. Have a good one. I will see you guys next week, possibly Wednesday, could be Thursday, or actually I'll have to figure that out, and I'll do announcements on Instagram, YouTube, and everywhere else, because of the holiday, we don't have daycare next week. So we'll see kind of when we can do it. We might just try and do a nap time one. So just keep your eyes to any of these social media sites, and I'll let you guys know. Thanks for watching.